This is your World War III update. In today's video, I'm going to be addressing criticisms made against my contention that the New Jersey drone phenomena is most plausibly explained as nuclear sniffing drones seeking out some sort of domestic terroristic threat. I have more evidence towards that end to present to you today, and I also plan on debunking the influencers, charlatans, and so-called debunkers who claim that this is not a plausible hypothesis. Now, before we go there, I want to say that you're probably already aware that a Russian nuclear general, in fact, the head of Russia's nuclear forces, the guy that oversees their civil defense protection infrastructure as it pertains to biological and nuclear threats, has indeed been assassinated. They've caught the perpetrator, who is in Russian custody. NATO, the Pentagon, have not condemned it. The Russians are attributing blame to NATO, who of course enables Ukraine to do these sorts of things. Ukraine has taken responsibility for it. The SBU has not denied culpability. So we know that indeed NATO, by proxy, has assassinated another member of Russia's strategic forces. Add this to the long list of attritional events that have taken many Russian assets, be they submarines, nuclear radars, nuclear bombers, Russian scientists, the list goes on and on. How much more strategic forbearance are the Russians going to demonstrate? Nobody knows. But we do know that the Russian Doomsday station, as it's colloquially referred, is broadcasting some rather ominous messages, and we're going to talk about that today. It was just been brought to my attention that Pierre Poilievre is also encouraging the Israelis to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, so I would not be surprised if we don't see that in the distant future as well. Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's foreign minister, has issued some more nuclear threats. At this point in time, nuclear threats from anybody within the Russian government, Vladimir Putin included, are not going to be taken seriously until the Russians actually act on them in some sort of meaningful way. But the Pentagon has said that they have credible intelligence to suggest that the Russians will indeed be launching another intermediate range ballistic Orezhnik missile in the not so distant future. And it appears as though the airspace over that particular region, Kapustin, I believe it is, has been shut down as well. So we very well could, by the time this video is over, see another demonstration of that capability. Now, it should be understood that modern systems, like those on drones or specialized aircraft, use highly sensitive detectors combined with artificial intelligence to analyze patterns and identify isotopic fingerprints of nuclear materials. These systems can sometimes detect isotopes like uranium or plutonium over large distances when particles are dispersed in the air. Yes, indeed, the technology does exist to detect nuclear materials and nuclear weapons from the air. The capabilities are going to vary, and that's going to, it's going to depend on the type of deployment system. So in the case of drones, can drones detect nuclear radiation from the sky? Yes, it depends on how high they are. It depends on what they're looking for. But before we get into the technical details of exactly what is and isn't possible, understand that there are individuals on this platform who are cheerleaders for the Ukrainians. Quite frankly, I'm impartial to the issue. I always, I question the Russian motives. I question the Ukrainian motives. I just want the war to stop. I don't want nuclear war to happen. But these guys have a vested interest in downplaying the nuclear threat. In fact, there was a video released yesterday of one of these very fringe Ukrainian elements who are saying that a nuclear war would in fact benefit them. And in fact, this is the mentality in many parts of Ukraine, where they believe that they not only can sustain a nuclear war, that they can fight long thereafter a nuclear war is initiated. So they're claiming that they want a nuclear war to happen because this will force NATO's hand into fully entering the conflict zone. So these guys who are making these false claims that this is impossible, I'm going to provide the technical reasons as to why it absolutely is possible, but understand what their motives are. Now, Joe Rogan was one of the individuals who was central in making this claim go viral. The claim from the CEO of the company who claims to make these drones for the US government. Obviously, he knows what the drone's capabilities are. Otherwise, he would have made the video. Anyways, Joe Rogan circulated his video, and that went viral. And that is what a lot of people are referencing when they're talking about the prospect of these drones being used for that purpose. Of course, they want you chasing aliens and a bunch of other bullshit. This is the most plausible theory. Okay, I've been breaking it down in several videos, but it bears repeating, and I have to tease out more details for people here today. Now, I put forth my video before I ever even came across Joe Rogan and the video in question. I came to this conclusion on my own based on the information that was available at the time. I wasn't the first person to introduce the hypothesis, but I went and did some digging and it made the most sense to me. So understand that my video was not the result of the viral video that people are claiming to debunk, okay? Now, I'm going to give you a metaphor to understand the significance of this. Let's say you're a search and rescue team and you get word that somebody is lost in one of those West Coast forests with the giant trees everywhere. The likelihood of finding somebody is like finding a needle in a haystack. Are you going to call off a search and rescue mission because the likelihood of finding something is very low? Of course you're not. You're going to, I'm not sure what the time frame that they will seek somebody out is, but I presume they're going to be looking rather rigorously for weeks on end before actually giving up the search. Now imagine if the lives of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people were at stake. You are looking for some trace radiation signature amidst the backdrop of radiation, some trace prominent signature. We're not talking about something that is so like a counts per minute in radiation that's so strong that it's going to give somebody radiation sickness. We're not talking about that. We're looking for perturbations. We're looking for aberrations from the background, the base rate. Okay, so you're looking for any sort of deviation from the background de facto normal amount of radiation. That's what you're seeking, very trace amounts. So if the average radiation read in that region is, I don't know, like 100 counts per minute, just hypothetically, you're looking for 200, 300. You're looking for leads. When hundreds of thousands of lives are at stake, you don't think that even though it might be futile in attempting to find something like that they're not going to do the investigation anyways? Give me a break. Now, that said, the technology absolutely exists in order to do this. The range of nuclear weapon sniffers or radiation detection devices varies depending on their design, sensitivity, and the conditions under which they are used. These devices are primarily designed to detect specific isotopes or unusual radiation signatures associated with nuclear weapons or materials. There's a few key factors that influence the range. The type of detector is going to influence the range. Gamma ray detectors like scintillators or high purity germanium detectors typically have ranges from tens of meters to a few kilometers in optimal conditions. Neutron detectors like helium-3 or boron trifluoride detectors are generally effective at shorter ranges because neurons are harder to detect and attenuate quickly in the environment. Yes, there is a thing called the inverse square law, but again, we're not looking for huge radiation spikes. You're looking for anything when it comes down to the prospect of possibly saving thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives. Now, slight tangent, I'm going to go off here. A New Jersey mayor has said that these drones are flying in grid-like patterns. You only do that if you're trying to map something out, or if you're trying to do a systematic search for something. And these drones have been reportedly flying at low altitudes within ranges which are perfectly capable of sniffing out nuclear materials. The New Jersey mayor himself said that they might be seeking out a missing radioactive device used for cancer treatment or something like that went missing at a port near a New Jersey port. I don't believe that is the case. If that were true, the government would come out and admit it. That is not something that is going to induce a panic. That is a benign event. If that was the case, the government would come out and say, oh yeah, that's what we're looking for. In fact, it's a convenient cover story, because now when people look up, go on Google and look up nuclear drone incident, New Jersey, they're going to come across that story by that mayor who is promulgating this idea. What they want people looking for are things of that magnitude. They want people looking for aliens. Remember, Donald Trump explicitly stated that he is avoiding his Bedminster home because he's concerned about this particular issue. Some people are saying that he was being facetious. I don't think so. I think he was being, he doubled down. He said it twice. He said, I'm canceling my trip for that particular reason. And he said that he was briefed on the intelligence that everybody else was briefed on. So they know what this is. They're claiming that it is not coming from outside the country. So that only leaves one other possibility, that it is some third-party agency, likely contracted by the government, who is not the Pentagon themselves, possibly Homeland Security, some other three-letter agency that is conducting this search on the government's behalf. So semantically, then, they can claim that it's not us doing it. Plausible deniability. At the same time, they don't want to trigger a panic. Okay, that's the biggest thing. If they were to come out and say that there was a nuclear weapon missing in New Jersey, the panic, the pandemonium it would cause would be absolutely chaotic and not conducive to actually finding said device. In fact, it might actually compel whoever is attempting to perpetrate such a domestic terroristic act to act quickly. Now, carrying on. Airborne sniffers can detect radioactive particles or gases over much longer distances, sometimes hundreds of kilometers downwind. Now, I presume they're talking about alpha beta particles that are radioactive that have been emitted from said device. So this one necessarily pertained to this, although those airborne sniffers can detect the gamma radiation spikes in different regions as well. People are claiming that those airborne sniffers have not been active over this region recently, but that's not to say that they weren't active prior to these drone sightings, and that wasn't the more broadband detection that prompted them to send in the drones, which I presume, and this is just a presumption, that these drones are going to be able to achieve a higher resolution of detection when it comes to these things. The broadband nuke sniffers can detect that something is in the general vicinity, and then they need to send these drones down for a closer look. Now, that's my speculation, because that's typically how these things work when it comes to searching for other things, right? Like if it comes down to like satellite imagery, for example, you can get a certain degree of resolution from satellite imagery, but if you want to get the 3D buildings and if you want to get all the nuances, you have to actually have one of those balloons, or you have to have something that is closer to the ground, like a drone mapping system, okay? Now, material shielding. If the nuclear material is heavily shielded, detection range decreases significantly because the radiation is absorbed before it escapes into the environment. Yes, it is very likely that a nuclear device or a dirty bomb material is encased in layers upon layers of shielding to prevent it from being detected. That's not the point. The simple fact that there's a possibility that they might find this thing. Maybe it's being transported from a cargo container to a truck, from a truck to a basement, to, if there's any possibility to interdict something which could potentially take the lives of thousands of hundreds of thousands of people, you don't think they're going to take that opportunity? Of course they are. So this is it's not an argument. It's not a valid argument to say that because there is a low likelihood of detection, that the government would not try to do this covertly. That's a stupid argument. And then the guy who's on Joe Rogan, who claims to be an expert also, who is saying that is also an idiot. And so is this other influencer here on YouTube. I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to, it's not that I don't want to start a conflict. It's because I don't want people going on their channel and riling things up, and, you know, people get aggressive and get doxxed. And I'm not trying to, I don't personally care about confronting this individual. I'll do that gladly. But in terms of, you know, sending people over there, I don't want to do that. So anyways, it absolutely is possible. It's plausible. In fact, it's the most, in my personal opinion, it's the only plausible explanation. The only other thing which I floated was one of the most likely explanations is that there's surveillance happening to a high degree and that they're trying to mask that with whatever dog and pony show they're creating right now with the alien hype and all that. Now, environmental conditions, urban settings. Yes, buildings and structures can block or scatter radiation, reducing detection range. Open environments obviously are more preferable. Detection is more straightforward over open ground or in the air. So it might be something as simple as a semi-truck is driving down the highway and it's emitting a stronger radiation signature, and that's a lead that the authorities are then going to pursue, okay? As I indicated, a New Jersey mayor, excuse me, says that the drones might be searching for missing radioactive material. I do not believe that is the case. It just would not make sense for the government to create all this hype and controversy over something that could be easily introduced to the population in such a way that it would not induce a panic. So no, I don't believe that this missing radioactive material is a result of some sort of, you know, medical device that went missing, although that is factually correct. The U.S. government corroborates that. Indeed, there is a missing nuclear medical device. I'm not sure if that could be converted into a nuclear dirty bomb of sorts. I presume that the amount of material present is going to be insufficient to do so. Federal officials have downplayed the threat that reported drones may pose, but Belleville, New Jersey Mayor Michael Melham suggested to Fox 5 New York on Tuesday that the alleged drones, which have captured national attention, could be looking for missing radioactive material. We know, he says, we have drones flying in a grid-like pattern. In my opinion, they're looking for something. What might they be looking for? We're aware of the threat that came through Port Newark. Maybe that's radioactive material. There is an alert that's out right now that radioactive material within New Jersey. So you see how this whole medical thing would be a very convenient cover story if there was actually the threat of a nuclear weapon. Again, we have, and I'm not saying it's the Ukrainians, okay? It could be anything. We got a lot of enemies, pretty much you name it, North Koreans, Chinese, and I don't think it's going to be these nation states themselves. It could be rogue elements within these nation states. It could be their proxies who are trying to antagonize and catalyze a nuclear conflict between superpowers. There are, just a wealth of different people who could potentially have motive attributed to them. So, or groups, I should say. So there's motive there, absolutely. But indeed, we don't know who it could potentially be. However, with Ukraine, there's a lot of motive and they have a lot of capability. And this individual on YouTube who is making these claims was indicating one of the debunking theories he had was that, well, this guy, this CEO of this company who made the claim that these drones were being used to search for nuclear material, he made also the claim at the beginning of that video that there were nuclear weapons that went missing during the Cold War, and he put that at the front end of his video, which was probably not the wisest thing to do, but it was probably part of the reason why it went viral. I don't know if these are Ukrainian nuclear weapons. There's certain fissile materials that could come from pretty much anywhere at this point in time. Can that be traced, and will it be traced back to the place of origin, and will that be used to incriminate, whether justly or unjustly, the nation state of origin? Absolutely, it will. But what we know is that there is a possibility there that this fissile material is out there and it can be used to make a dirty bomb or a nuclear weapon. So, with those two things, that was what the influencer was trying to debunk. And he provided a historical lesson and some arguments as to why that's likely not the case. You know, who knows? Who really knows? I mean, we don't have that level of clearance. We should presume that because there were tens of thousands of nuclear weapons during the Cold War era, that it is not hard to believe that either one has gone missing or since that time, some other nuclear weapon or dirty bomb device has been created. Okay, there's a lot of radioactive waste out there. Excuse me. So, like I said, he claims that these are flying in a grid-like pattern. Now, the alert from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NERC, that Mel M referred to was issued earlier this month and said that the material event contained a less than Cat 3 level of radioactive material, meaning that it's very unlikely to cause permanent injury to individuals, or contain a very small amount of radioactive material that would not cause any permanent injury. So again, it's not about whether this doesn't have to be a large amount of radiation. It just has to be enough that it is a prominent radioactive signature amidst the baseline. So that's what it is. Everything else I've told you about FEMA preparations for such an event, the subtle priming of the population with nuclear PSAs and campaigns about how to get ready for this very incident, poster campaigns, all sorts of public awareness campaigns, and not counting, of course, the big one, which was the government's attempts to acquire 220,000 doses from yours truly of potassium iodide. You put all these things together and it makes perfect sense that there is a very high possibility that this, in fact, is going to be one of the most likely scenarios, and that this is probably what they're looking for. Some people are saying one of the reasons why they don't think this is true is because the drones are operational at night, and if they were looking for a nuclear threat, they'd be looking for it during the day. Try again. The reason why they wouldn't do it during the day is because clearly you would see what type of drone it is, and it would then be easy to identify that drone was actually looking for radiation, because these drones have a distinct look. I mean, you might be able to make the drone in such a way that it can disguise the fact that it's looking for that, but these drones, which I've shown on the channel in that actual video, and the ones that I've researched, they have a distinct look to them, okay? It's clearly carrying a payload with a bunch of sensors on it, and so you know it's looking for something. So the reason why they don't do it during the day is because then it would be obvious. They do it at night and they put the lights on so that they're in compliance with the FAA regulations, and then the government can come out and say, oh yeah, these things, just like Pat Ryder said the other day, don't worry, these drones are in compliance with FAA regulations, but we don't know what they are, right? And don't worry, it's not the Pentagon doing it. It is, I can't remember what other three-letter agencies they absolved of culpability, but they are saying that these things are up there and they're not from an external source. So then what are they? Clearly, the government knows what they are, because Trump said that he knows what they are, and he's saying that he's not traveling to that location. So you put all of this together and it's obvious. But the NATO shills don't want you to think that, because it impacts support for their bullshit, possibly nuclear war. Up until this point, though, I mean, I gotta give him some credit. Yeah, the strategic forbearance demonstrated by Vladimir Putin and the Russians and the entire axis of resistance is laudable. I mean, these guys have had all aspects of their nuclear triad gradually eroded by NATO. Yet they have the jurisprudence of a Buddhist monk when it comes to holding NATO to account. And they just refuse. They refuse to do anything that is going to establish real deterrence. Oh, look, we launched one Orezhnik missile. Okay, that was good for a week. Too bad the very next day, NATO continues to do strikes. In fact, today, NATO did strikes on 2 Russian oblasts outside of Kursk using Storm Shadow and ATACMS missiles to attack airstrips. So, clearly, a deterrence has not been established and won't be until the Russians actually do some shit. What they're going to do, I don't know. Do I want them to do some shit? No. because that means that's going to give NATO the justification that they need to ramp up the war. That's what the Ukrainians want. That's what the war hawks within NATO absolutely want. They are frothing at the mouth for Vladimir Putin to make the call. Vladimir Putin doesn't want to do that because he thinks, naively, and I don't actually think he believes this, and the Russians, in fact, Lavrov, Putin, all of them are on record as saying they don't think Trump's going to change a damn thing. He's going to go there for a photo op. He's going to shake Putin's hand. He's going to come back home to Washington and nothing's going to change. Just like what happened with the North Korean situation. Went over there. It was a big photo op. Everybody thought this was the beginning of a new rapprochement. What happened? Absolutely nothing. In fact, the complete opposite happened. After that, North Korea fired off more tests of ballistic missiles than ever before in history, the year afterwards. And they started stockpiling nuclear weapons at a breakneck pace. They are now a full-on nuclear power. So yeah, Trump's not going to change a damn thing. The Russians know it, but they're playing along. I don't know what it's going to take to really truly cross that red line, but every red line has been crossed. Every single possible. Could you imagine if the head of US Stratcom was assassinated by Russia and they started blowing up our stealth bombers and they started to take out our nuclear radars and they started to kill our nuclear scientists? Could you imagine? I mean, any one of those things would have elicited a massive unhinged response. Medvedev, in a typical fashion, in a typical hollow threat, has threatened the NATO leadership. Medvedev called for the destruction of those who ordered the murder of General Krylov. I don't believe that the assassination of General Krylov is ado with his knowledge of bioweapons programs that were established in Ukraine. According to him, that there were illegal biolabs operating in Ukraine. And people are saying that this is the reason why the Ukrainians took him out. I don't believe that is the case, because that information, whatever information was in his head, we can presume is somewhere else inside Russia and will be carried on by anybody who inherits the position. So I don't believe it was that. This was a clear provocation, an attempt to try to get the Russians to do something rash. Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, called for the elimination of those who ordered the murder of the head of the NBC protection troops. That, of course, is the SBU. They don't deny it. On Ukrainska Pravda, they take credit for it. So that presumes that the SBU, who ostensibly is at the behest of Zelensky, who's at the behest of NATO, clearly as a vassal state, as a protectorate, NATO is the ones who's responsible for this. So this is leading people to believe that Dmitry Medvedev is calling for the assassination of NATO officials, which is possible. I mean, we're really almost there. We really are almost there. Now, the Doomsday radio station, also known as the Zazulka, has been broadcasting since the 1970s, has been transmitting only buzz at a frequency of 4625 kilohertz. The last time her broadcast was interrupted was for words by words for several days at the beginning of the special military operation, which of course would have been at a time when Russian strategic forces were at the highest level of alert. They think that this frequency is broadcasting Russia's strategic command codes, and that messages that come across this frequency are some sort of cryptic messaging related to a impending doomsday. It's also the one, I believe, which is attributed to the doomsday, what is it called? The dead hand system, that thing that needs to be pinged every so often. And if it isn't, that means that the Russian leadership has been wiped out and it launches all the missiles. It's called the dead hand system. I'm not sure if it's still operational. Many people still believe it is. The usually silent doomsday radio station associated with the Russian army suddenly became active, broadcasting a record number of words and songs, including the track Shaman and Swan Lake. December 11th, 2024, Zazulka broadcasts 24 messages per day, and it broadcasts all these obscure words and meaningless, or presumably meaningless garble to anybody who can't decrypt it. Hunhuns, ABC, Your Mother, etc. became the most verbose program in history. And on December 17th, she played Shaman's track, I'm Russian. and then I believe it played the Russian national anthem last night. Then the symbols on the screen demonstrating the frequencies formed into an image of an animal and then into the word grommel. What does the word grommel mean? Is that biblical? Is that some reference to the Lord of the Rings or something? I don't know. The broadcast said that this is grommel. Then the radio station broadcast a composition from Swan Lake and then the Union Anthem. In Z channels, they write that music over the radio station is often played by radio amateurs for fun, and this is quite easy to do. The transmission of the words is not explained there. However, this has not happened, allegedly, for some time, since the beginning of the conflict in Russia. And of course, it would be illegal to do this, to broadcast on that frequency, and I presume they would be able to triangulate the location of the person doing it, as is the case with ham radio frequencies, so that would discourage people from wanting to do that for fear of reprisal. Since the launch of buzzer in the 1970s, it has been shrouded in versions and myths. It is often called one of the elements of the Russian perimeter system. That's what it's called, the dead hand perimeter system, a complex for automated launch of nuclear weapons in the event of war. According to one version, if the buzzer's signal is interrupted, perimeter will launch a retaliatory nuclear strike against the intended enemy. That's why it's called the Doomsday radio station. According to other assumptions, the radio station broadcasts secret messages, including in order to confirm the readiness of operators at receiving stations. So it is very likely that this might have something to do with a impending Orezhnik launch. The Pentagon claims that they know this is coming. The Russians have been notifying the Pentagon 24 hours in advance of any sort of tests or firing of ICBMs. So despite the fact that there are no actively enforced nuclear treaties, the Russians and the Americans are still informing each other only 24 hours in advance, however, of these potential threats. Now, in the case of taking out the Ukrainian leadership with one of these Orezhnik missiles, you could only really do it if you didn't give forewarning. So we may be entering a point, and I'm pretty sure that the U.S. leadership is not going to launch on warning like they say they're going to do, something that is embedded in their nuclear doctrine, which affords them the ability to launch if they believe that a nuclear strike is imminent, not if they, in fact, I think the revised nuclear doctrine allows for a preemptive strike, so they don't even have to believe that a strike is impending. They can launch because they don't like the color of Vladimir Putin's shoes that day, if they so choose. Sergei Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister of Russia, stated that due to the increasingly reckless actions of the West, tangible risks are being created that the situation will move to a state where the use of nuclear weapons may become a practice. He used the term a practice, okay? The normalization of the low-yield tactical nuclear weapons we will see in our lifetime. You know that movie Starship Troopers? Go and watch that movie again. That and Demolition Man, some combination of the two is the perfect, is the most prescient films of the 90s. Go and watch those videos again. They use the low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. When he talks about becoming a practice, he means it. Means it's going to become commonplace. And once that seal is broken, then the sky is the limit for mutually assured destruction. You know, I take issue, sidebar here, and I think I'm going to have to do some kind of, I don't know what you call it, an expose or just some sort of critical video dedicated toward Annie Jacobsen's new book, Nuclear War. This has to be the most demoralizing, fatalistic read ever when it comes to emergency preparedness for nuclear activities. She just outright thinks you shouldn't prepare for it because everybody is going to die, even though trillions of dollars. In fact, she was commenting, she had tweeted about a Ron video, Atlas Survival Shelters. You guys know who he is, needs no introduction on this channel, a friend of the channel. He is the, world's foremost private contracted Doomsday bunker guy. Militaries of the world contract him for various advice or consultations related to building bunkers. And she was sharing one of his videos, and she said that, I can't remember what it is, something to the effect of, bunkers are completely meaningless with respect to nuclear conflict, because after that first nuke is fired, all the nukes are going to get fired, and the whole bullshit nuclear winter hypothesis, which we've debunked on the channel thoroughly in a dedicated video on this channel before. But she is making the claim that all the bunkers that have ever been built in the history of governments, I'm sure totaling in the trillions of dollars, all the civil defense infrastructure that has been created for the prospect of a nuclear conflict is all for naught, and it's all just stupid, okay? All I can say to that is, you know what, I am going to do a dedicated video on that particular issue, because as much as she's bringing awareness to these particular issues, as we stated in the past, this actually works, and this is actually a national security threat. When you have somebody running around discouraging preparedness, even though in China, in Russia, in North Korea, and Iran, they have a culture of preparedness. They believe that nuclear war is survivable, despite what Vladimir Putin might say. Officially, the actual Russian military strategy is to survive and win a nuclear war. And in fact, our leaders believe that they can win a nuclear war. So Annie Jacobsen, despite providing a lot of the nuance to how nuclear weapons work, what our missile defense capabilities are, how that whole thing might look, what a mutually assured destruction scenario might look like, barring the nuclear winter phenomena, which is simply that, just theoretical. It's not proven. And especially now that there's far more limited and targeted nuclear weapons, the idea that there will be a nuclear winter is been drastically diminished by virtue of the enhancements in the technology alone. So no, Annie Jacobsen is wrong. Nuclear war is absolutely survivable, okay? I used to believe that also, but if our adversaries don't believe that, and we do, and they're spending billions outfitting their critical infrastructure for that very thing, you have to ask yourself, clearly our government does not care about us. And that's one thing about authoritarian leaders. I'm not sure if there's a quote about this, but they may not care about individuals more than we do, but they care about the collective. Okay, they care about their country. I believe that Vladimir Putin does, in fact, love his country. Kim Jong-un loves his country. Xi Jinping loves his country. Pezeshkian, the Iranian leader, he loves his country. And they're willing to sacrifice. It's true. The Russians are willing to sacrifice a lot more people than we are, okay? But at the end of the day, they want their country to prevail, which is why they invest in these more collectivist civil defense infrastructure projects, of which there is nothing in the United States. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Maybe during the Cold War, there was stuff, but nowadays, it's negligible, okay? They're there for continuity of government purposes, and that only. They don't give a shit what happens to me and you. And that is just a fact, Jack. Mark Rutte has announced the launch of the NATO command in Ukraine. Secretary General Mark Rutte announced the start of the work of the Alliance Command to coordinate arms supplies to Ukraine in wise band. Look, anybody who thinks that this war is about to de-escalate, you're in for a rude awakening. They're sending more money. Zelensky is now going to appeal for NATO troops to be taken in. All of this talk about rapprochement, peace talks with Putin and Trump, it's all theater. All theater. Mark my words. When we are here next year, at this period of time, let's hope that the lights are still on at that time, and we are closer, not further. Just remember who warned you. Okay? So keep on prepping, my friends. But I will say, 'tis the season, and yeah, we do like to have fun on this channel as well. If you want to see some of the crew and behind the scenes, and you want to have a few laughs, go and watch our Christmas special. I should have called it a prepping carol, but I called it a very merry Doomsday Christmas. It is a play on the Charles Dickens Ebenezer Scrooge story, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. Just kick back and, we make fun of ourselves. We make fun of everybody. Everybody gets roasted in that video, and it's all good fun because we're all in this together. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. So just keep that in mind. Even, you trolls out there, we're all in this together, man. So I wish you the best. I do wish you the best. So you guys just take care of yourself and do yourself a favor. Kick back, bring the family together. Well, maybe not. There's some PG-13 parts to the video, but more or less nothing they won't be exposed to when you leave them to their devices. Go and check it out, guys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah.